Hey there, do you dare? If you're into true crime, the paranormal, mysteries, and everything in between, check out Do You Dare? It's a podcast where siblings Emily and Kian Dare dive into the cases that fascinate and unsettle them. They take turns picking the stories, true crime, ghostly encounters, unsolved mysteries, and share all the details with each other and you. Plus, you'll hear the occasional cameo from Emily's dog Kylo and his squeaky toy. If you're looking for something intriguing, creepy, and a little bit fun, give Do You Dare a listen wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, come back next week, if you dare. Research and recording of Canadian Creepies happens on the shared land and traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. A key treaty governing this territory is the Dish with One Spoon Agreement. This treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee people binds them to share and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, settlers, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. We all share the responsibility of ensuring the dish is never empty, meaning we must take care of the land and the creatures we share in it. Canadian Creepies covers true crime, dark history, and disturbing events. Some episodes may include graphic descriptions or sensitive subject matter. We do our best to handle every story with care and respect for those affected. That said, we sometimes use humor and sarcasm as a way to process heavy content, never to disrespect victims, survivors, or their families. Listener discretion is advised. We want to be transparent with our listeners. Canadian Creepies is currently a non-profit project. We don't make any money from the podcast. However, any revenue that is generated from this series will be donated entirely to payyourrent.ca. The only ad you'll hear in this series will be a message about payyourrent.ca itself. Payyourrent.ca is an Indigenous-led initiative that calls on settlers and non-Indigenous people in Canada to pay voluntary ongoing contributions, or rent, to the Indigenous nations whose lands they live on. The platform helps direct funds to specific Indigenous communities and organizations supporting sovereignty, self-determination, and vital community needs. We believe it's one small way to move beyond words toward meaningful action. Welcome back, Creepy Crew. We've got something a little different for you this summer, and we're really excited to finally share it.
That's right. This is the Canadian Creepies' first ever summer series. Woo! 6 special episodes that have been pre-recorded in anticipation of our usual summer chaos.
Because we are chaotic in the summer.
We're fucking chaotic, okay?
We're booked and busy.
We're booked, busy, and fucking chaotic. Get out of the way or get in the way.
Yeah.
So while we normally keep things fresh with current cases and segments like Creep of the Week, these episodes are all about taking a deep dive into the darkest chapters of Canadian history.
And when we say dark, we mean one of the biggest Canadian creepies of all time. Residential schools.
Ooh, I've been waiting for this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Over the next 6 episodes, we'll be unpacking how these institutions came to be, the damage they caused, and how their legacy still affects Indigenous communities today.
Yeah, and we know this is a heavy, heavy topic, but it's one that needs to be told, people, understood and acknowledged, okay? We need to, it's our duty,
yes,
almost.
It is.
The more we learn, the more we can recognize the full scope of what happened and why the effects are still felt and how fucked it was.
And also, just on a side note, I was watching this interview the other day. And like I said, this is pre-recorded. But so I was watching this interview the other day, and it was with this Indigenous man. And he said it is not Indigenous people's responsibility to teach white folks what they did to them.
Right.
That's our job as white folks to tell other, educate our ancestors,
That's
our
why
people.
None of this should be eliminated from any type of curriculum. Black
Agreed.
History Month should be year. It should, yeah. I still think, yeah. And We need to admit our privilege.
Agreed.
Yeah.
In this first episode, Foundations of a System of Erasure, we're starting at the very beginning, looking at pre-colonial Indigenous education and spirituality, the early missionary schools of the 1600s and 1800s, and the rise of government and church-run residential schools in the 1870s.
Wow. We'll also be breaking down the policies that built and sustained the system, because residential schools weren't just an accident of history. They were carefully designed, enforced, and upheld for generations by motherfuckers. This series is an important one, and we encourage you to listen with an open heart and mind. If you ever need to take a break, please do. We'll be covering some difficult truths, but these are stories that deserve to be told. Yeah, so let's get right into it. This is episode 1, Foundations of a System of Erasure.
Cool.
Yeah, cool. I'm actually very intrigued.
Yeah,
and
it's cool.
It's crazy because, like, growing up, I mean, Pierre Trudeau, he was involved in this shit, right?
Perhaps. Let's
I
find
feel
out.
like he was, or he, like... Anyways, I just feel like I probably, like, clap my hands and, like, I'm so proud to be, like, associated with, like, these individuals of my, like, upbringing history. And then it's like, now I'm in my 30s and I'm like, wow, this fucking toxic person that I didn't know was toxic. Like, I felt like I was, like, brainwashed.
Yes.
Not brainwashed, just kind of, like, I don't know.
I get what you mean.
Yeah, it was also, like, growing up in the 90s, like
it was so much of
I
the
had family
same-
members that were like, so and so is gay, but like we're not going to talk about it. It's like hush hush. And,
Right.
and it was like, and I remember being like, why? Like,
Yeah,
why do we care?
why aren't we talking about it? So I Googled Pierre Trudeau residential schools,
Okay.
and the first article that came up is from Toronto.com, and it's 10 Canadian leaders who contributed to Indigenous schools. And Hey, Google, stop.
Freaking Google and Alexa.
The G word also said Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau and his Minister of Indian Affairs, Jean Chrétien, who would later become a prime minister,
Ooh, maybe that's
issued
it.
the paper in 1969. The white paper proposed to abolish all legal documents that had previously existed, including but not limited to the Indian Act and all existing treaties within Canada, compromising Canadian Aboriginal law.
So wait, they just wanted to like bury it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Typical.
Never heard a bad
Typical.
thing about these individuals until now that I'm like an adult and I can do my own research and hear
Right.
my own shit.
Right?
Yeah. Hear my own shit. Like talk about my yeah.
I get what you're
You
saying.
you get it.
Everybody, the listeners, we know you guys get it. By this
get
point,
it.
if you have listened to us for this long, and
A
if you're just
jibber
tuning
jabber.
in, welcome. Welcome
Yeah.
to the Jibber Jabber. It's what we do.
Yeah. It's who we are.
It's who we are.
What is that from? Oh, I'm thinking Ursula. It's what we do. It's what we do.
Poor
It's what we
unfortunate
are. Yeah.
souls. Yeah.
Anyways,
That was like
it's
that
who-
was
I live for something.
yeah. That sounds like Cruella, what you're doing.
No, I swear.
And I just said poor unfortunate souls to the tune of Arabian Nights, so that's my bad.
Arabia. Oh yeah, it's what I live for. Hold on. Oh, I don't know. Something that's what I live for. And hold on. Maybe this is it. Wait.
My dear sweet child, that's what I do. It's what I live for.
That was it. I knew I had it, okay?
Perfect.
This is part of the
Perfect.
jibber jabber.
That's it. We love it. And I'll put that in as like a real clip. Okay. So I'll start and then you'll go.
I'll jabby in.
Okay.
All right.
Before European contact, Indigenous nations across what is now Canada had rich, diverse systems of education and spirituality that were deeply interwoven into daily life. These systems were built on oral traditions, experiential learning, and a profound relationship with the land, ancestors, and spiritual forces. This is a detailed breakdown of how education and spirituality functioned within various Indigenous cultures. So we're talking about, sorry, I guess I just hopped right into that. We're talking about pre-colonial Indigenous education and spirituality. that's what, before the residential schools, we have to start at the very beginning, which is what they were before we colonized them.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. So here is Indigenous education before colonization.
Okay.
Learning through oral traditions. Indigenous education was primarily oral and experiential, which sounds like something like a lot of students could benefit from.
Legit.
Elders, knowledge keepers, and community leaders passed down histories, traditions, and skills through storytelling, songs, and ceremonies.
Way more fun.
Way more fun. And like, what a way to cement it in the brain, you know?
Right?
These oral histories were meticulously maintained and carried deep spiritual, moral, and practical lessons.
Okay, hold on. Just a side note.
Yeah.
That just reminded me of, like, when you'd go to, like, camp. Like, because I don't remember anything I learned in, like, when I was a kid, like grade 4 or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I do remember camp story songs. Like, there's the one that was like, going on a bear hunt, going on a bear hunt, got my binoculars. Yeah. I'm not scared.
I remember, like...
Tell me why I remember that, but I don't remember, like, anything about Jean Chrétien.
I'm not scared.
Yes, I wish.
So
anyways, I wish this. Yeah.
I was in counseling the other day, and I don't know if she listens to this podcast, but I'm sure it's fine because I'm not going to use her name and nobody knows who she is.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was talking just like about my childhood or something because we're starting the EMDR therapy. So when you're doing EMDR and you're rewiring, you have to start at the very beginning, like pre-birth. So we're going through all this like 0 to 4 sort of stuff. And I said something like, we got to a point where I was like, oh, I don't know. I remember not being able to sleep well when I was younger. And, you know, I had a lot of fears of death, dying, people breaking into the house, my parents dying, waking up to no parents, that sort of thing. And she was like,
damn.
She was like, she's like, that's pretty developmentally normal. And then she looked at me and said, the other day, my 4-year-old said she would kill the entire family if no one took a bath with her.
Oh, yeah. Why did we say such fucked up stuff?
And I was like, are you serious? She went, yep. She came into the kitchen, looked at us all and said,
I'll murder you all.
I will kill my entire family if one of you does not take a bath with me.
Yeah,
and
we
I
all
could
took
not
baths
stop
together when we
laughing.
were kids. That's also like, it's so funny. Like, did you ever press, like if you were laying in bed and you couldn't sleep, did you ever close your eyes and like press on your eyeballs to like see those weird little googly shapes?
Like,
press.
No.
Okay, like I remember doing that, but like I don't remember like what I did on the farm a week ago. But I'm like, I remember pressing my eyeballs so hard and then like opening them and I was like, wow, shapes. Like really weird. Now I have a headache. And it's, like, probably because you're pressing your eyeballs into your brain. Yeah. Oh man.
Okay.
Good times.
All right, back to it.
Yeah, okay.
So some of the learning through oral traditions they had was storytelling as education. Stories were used to teach about ethics, relationships, and survival skills. They also help maintain collective memory and cultural identity. Songs and dance. Many lessons were passed down through traditional songs and dances, which encoded history and spiritual beliefs, and symbolic arts and writings. Some nations use symbolic representations such as wampum belts among the Haudenosaunee or petroglyphs to document treaties and significant events. So basically the history.
Why did we hate them so much?
We just wanted the land and our ancestors are assholes.
Yeah, and like I feel like I remember specifically hearing in like a documentary that like whites looked at Indigenous as like filth. Like
and why
beasts.
Would,
like
why would we even why? Because they were
we
different?
Jealous? I think that sounds a lot like jealousy.
Yeah, that exactly. And well, because it was because all these frail British men were coming off the boat like righto.
Yes, exactly.
And there were these sick
the earth is flat.
There were these sick 6-packed Indigenous men with their long hair just like flowing in the wind. It's like doing these like hunting calls. Like
and
they were like, oh fuck, these guys are gonna take our women.
Yeah, they're going to take our women and they give respect to animals and anything that blast them with the rifle.
Yeah, let's shoot them out of here.
Yeah. Light them up.
Light them up. So another form of Indigenous education before colonization was hands-on experiential learning. Education was not confirmed. Education was not confined to a formal setting. Rather, it was woven into daily life. Children learned by observation and participation, gradually taking on more responsibilities as they matured. An example of this would be hunting and gathering. Boys often learned hunting, trapping, and fishing from their fathers or uncles, while girls learned foraging, medicine making, and food preparation from their mothers or grandmothers. Now, that being said, I do know that Indigenous people do truly believe in the idea of two. They call their trans folks they refer to trans folks as two-spirited.
Yeah,
We've spoken about this.
Yeah. It's actually a beautiful way to put it.
So beautiful.
Right?
Yes, so beautiful.
I love it.
And
Right, Daisy?
so I imagine when it comes to hunting and gathering, though it says boys often did this, girls often did this and learned from, I imagine those roles were likely interchangeable. You know?
Yes.
Okay, so also another example of hands-on learning was spiritual and ceremonial learning. So some children were selected for specific spiritual roles and underwent rigorous training with shamans or medicine people. Very cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Trade and diplomacy. Among nations engaged in trade, the Anishinaabe, Cree, and Dene, or Dene, I think Dene.
Dene, I think.
Children learned negotiation and diplomacy by accompanying elders on trading expeditions.
Brilliant.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like, I'm sorry, I just blew out everyone's speakers with
I
that.
went to the Toronto Food Terminal.
Yeah, well, that's good. You still learned something.
Kinda. What's this? Ali, just sit down, please. Dad's got to do this. Ari, I'm going to go get a hot chocolate.
I can picture you in that picture you sent me next to the... Another form of Indigenous education before colonization, or the last form that we're going to discuss today, is community-based learning and governance. Education was communal and emphasized collective responsibility rather than individual achievement. Again, snaps. They got it right. They got it right. Mm-hmm. Children were raised by extended families and taught that their actions affected the entire community, which all little white boys could learn something about.
Yeah, we took steps backwards. I can tell you that much.
We did.
Us whiteies.
And anybody white could learn something about.
Not to bash whites.
Not to bash our own people.
But I mean,
we need to take responsibility right now.
Because
it's
I
our
am
podcast.
In fact white, and
there's no one stopping us.
We did horrible things,
Awful,
and we need to be held accountable for it.
Very bad, no good things.
Yes. I mean, so did every culture.
Exactly. And what we can do in this time of almost like what we can do in this time of instant connectivity and instant learning, we have knowledge at our fingertips, is use that knowledge to our power, to our advantage, and we should learn from our mistakes. Let's not let history
and not
repeat
be ashamed
itself.
to like admit
we fucked up.
Yeah, that we fucked
up.
Yeah.
Now we got to do better. So a form of community-based learning and governance was the clan system in governance. So many nations had clan-based systems, such as the Haudenosaunee, where each clan had specific responsibilities, and children were educated within those roles.
That's cool.
And conflict resolution through councils and talking circles. I love that.
Yeah,
I'm obsessed.
Too.
I love it.
Yeah.
Learned consensus-based decision-making and peaceful conflict. Youth learned consensus-based decision-making and peaceful conflict resolution.
Bring that back.
Bring that back. Indigenous spirituality varied widely across nations, but some common threads existed. A deep connection to the land, respect for ancestors, and an understanding of the world as interconnected. There was a connection to the land and animism. Many Indigenous spiritual beliefs are rooted in animism, the understanding that all things, living and non-living, have a spirit.
I love that.
But
I'm not religious, but I like that.
Right, I love that too. This means that there would be a sacred relationship with nature. With mountains, rivers, animals, and plants, they were seen as relatives and teachers deserving respect and gratitude. I love that so much. Our planet would not be in the situation it's in now if we were like this.
I just feel like I like that concept because a lot of religion that I hear about that I heard about growing up, and I'm not here to bash Christianity, but I'm going to use it as an example of like what I learned from something like Christianity was like there are those that are better than others when there shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And in something like this sacred relationship with nature and
The stuff that gives and provides us life.
It's like you're giving respect to things more than just like human existence.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
And what a like an
like
in-tune way to live with life.
Like no hatred.
None. Zero.
Something like Christianity, you can't argue me that there's not hate involved in that.
Oh, there's hate.
There's hate. There's plenty
of
it,
hell.
actually.
There's hate. Yeah.
There's hate based on color. There's hate based on gender. There's hate based on sexuality. Like there's hate.
Exactly.
And in something like this, I would anyways, I could go on. I really like this is what I'm saying.
Yes. With pre-colonial indigenous spirituality, there was also ceremonies and rites of passage. Indigenous ceremonies were essential to spiritual life and often marked important transitions. And I even think, I'm going to leave that.
Yeah.
Vision quests. In many nations, young people underwent fasting and isolation in nature to seek spiritual guidance. This was a major rite of passage. Sweat lodges were used for purification, healing, and prayer. Sweat lodges were spaces of deep spiritual connection.
Love it.
Sundance, potlatch, and other gatherings. Many nations held elaborate ceremonies that reinforced spiritual teachings, social structure, and reciprocity.
Yep, love it.
There was also spiritual leadership and medicine people within pre-colonial indigenous spirituality. Spiritual leaders, often called medicine people, shamans, or elders, played a crucial role in guiding communities.
I just feel like there was a whole lot of healing happening.
A whole lot of healing.
Even if it wasn't actually
and just like so much
scientifically healing.
Right. Just like
inner peace healing.
Yes.
We need more
just
of
like
that.
Spirit healing.
Yeah.
So they were healers and herbalists. They had a knowledge of plants and their healing properties was extensive. Their knowledge of plants and their healing properties was extensive, with medicine people using a combination of herbs, prayer, and ritual for healing.
Cool.
Dream interpretation and prophecy,
so cool.
Right? Dreams and visions were considered messages from ancestors or spirits, and spiritual leaders helped interpret their meanings.
Well, my messages would be fucked.
Yeah, my dreams are fucked.
I always think of the meme that's like, your dreams like represent blah, blah, blah. And then it was like my dreams, and it's like cats with wizard hats. And I'm like, that's you. That's you and I.
Yes, that's you. That's literally you and I.
Yeah.
Guardian spirits and animal totems. Many indigenous peoples believed individuals had a spirit guide or animal protector who provided wisdom and strength.
I love it.
Yes, and on that note, never, ever, 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 my white friends, my white non-indigenous friends, please don't refer to anything or anyone as your spirit guide or your spirit animal. Thank you.
Oh, that's my...
Oh, you're like my spirit. You're not. That's not appropriate.
That annihilated
don't do that.
drunk person that was like partying all over the friggin' bar top. They are my spirit animal or spirit whatever.
That's not...
That's really, really fucking rude.
I'm calling you out now. Stop doing it. I've clocked you.
I can call myself out. I feel like I did that back in the day.
Yeah, I totally did do that. I did do that.
Yeah. We learn from it.
We learn.
We call ourselves out.
We call ourselves out publicly, internationally.
Take accountability.
This podcast has really gone places. As well, so there was the role of the ancestors within pre-colonial indigenous spirituality is as follows. Honoring ancestors was fundamental. The dead were not considered gone, but remained active in guiding and protecting the living.
I mean, that's kind of like a guardian angel type vibe, but I like this better still.
Way better.
Still, these are just,
way better.
Way better.
Way better. So they had offerings and feasts. Many nations held ceremonies to honor the deceased, leaving food, tobacco, or gifts to show respect. And there were sacred burial practices. Proper burial and ceremony ensured that spirits could transition peacefully into the next world.
There's, I just don't want... Well, I mean, in South Asian culture, in Asian cultures, alone as well. They have things where they, like, say, put out oranges and put out, would that be,
Like an offering?
yeah, like an offering.
Yeah, they do that like in Mexico too with Day of the Dead.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Such a
I love
respectful, like, yeah.
I love it.
It's better than sacrificing like a
goat.
A goat. Yeah. I much prefer oranges and grapefruits. Horrible.
Okay, do you want to do the next part?
Impact of colonization on Indigenous education and spirituality.
This is where it starts to get bad.
Oh my goodness. Okay. The arrival of European colonizers, and the implementation of colonial policies sought to dismantle these deeply ingrained systems. Ooh, I'm already getting my blood's boiling.
Right.
The imposition of residential schools, bans on ceremonies like the potlatch and Sundance, and the suppression of Indigenous languages all served as tools of cultural erasure. That is fucked.
It's fucked.
Like, how much hate do you have?
Right.
Like, have a tea. Have one of Val's teas.
Have a tea.
They're healing.
They're delish. They're made with love.
This episode will explore how these foundational systems were disrupted, setting the stage for the development of residential schools and forced assimilation policies that followed. Everybody's blood, get ready for it to boil over
It's
top.
gonna boil.
Yeah, it's gonna boil.
It's gonna boil.
But we're here to have it boil together.
Yeah, that's right. I love that. We're here to boil together.
And then simmer and calm down.
And then we're going to use that
then
simmer
punch.
That's right. We're going to use that simmer pot to punch someone.
Not you, Daisy.
Not you. We would never punch you,
kiss
Daisy.
Give me
No,
kisses.
yes. Good girl. Okay, so we're going to talk about early missionary schools.
Cool.
And those are from the 1600s to the 1800s.
Cry.
The foundation for the residential school system in Canada was laid centuries before it became formalized. Between the 1600s and the 1800s, early missionary schools operated by Christian religious orders were the first major attempt by European settlers to impose their education, language, and religious beliefs on Indigenous people. These schools were not yet the government-run residential schools of later years, but were the precursors setting the stage for the policies of forced assimilation that would follow. So here's the purpose and intent of early missionary schools.
Gotcha.
When European colonizers arrived in what is now Canada, they viewed Indigenous spiritual beliefs, traditions, and governance structures as obstacles to European-style civilization and Christianization. Mm-hmm. The early schools were built around three main objectives. The first being religious conversion. Schools were designed to replace Indigenous spiritual beliefs with Christianity, primarily Catholicism or Protestantism.
I hate it. I hate it because I hate it today.
I mean,
like, no hate towards anybody.
Like freedom of religion. And we've said that over and over, freedom of religion.
Just personally.
Just don't make me
You probably
have
wouldn't
your
like
religion.
me, and that's fine.
And that's okay.
But I really hate that fucking...
Yeah.
This
just the
happens.
religious conversion. Yeah. It's the worst.
Because there's nothing wrong with the...
It was beautiful.
before.
The way they were living life, it was nice to the land. It was nice to the people.
Everything.
It was entering like nice energies into the world. Okay, so the second objective was cultural assimilation. European settlers believed that Indigenous ways of life were inferior and sought to civilize, in quotes, because I don't believe it.
They were already civilized.
Beautifully civilized.
Yeah.
Wonderfully civilized.
Yeah.
They sought to, in quotes, civilize Indigenous children by teaching them...
And scaring them.
And scaring them.
And torturing them.
Right. And by teaching them European customs, language, and societal roles. And the third objective was, what is the root of all evil, my friends? Money! Ugh. Economic exploitation. Missionaries and colonial officers,
give me a break.
Right, wanted to prepare Indigenous people for a subordinate role in colonial society, particularly in labor and agriculture. Unlike the later residential school system, these early missionary schools were often small and lacked formal government funding, but their impact was still significant. Do you want to do the key periods and institutions?
Not really.
Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, you're on a roll.
Okay.
I'll do education methods when we get down there.
Oh, love. Okay. So here are the key periods and institutions of. I like how we do this on the fly, and I leave it in too because I'm like it's fun.
Yeah,
it's
us being real.
It's us being real, and that's what a podcast is. It's a conversation.
Conversation.
It's a conversation. We're from Ontario. So key periods and institutions of early missionary schools. Number one is the first missionary schools, and they were around the 16 to 1700s. The first Indigenous-focused schools were created by Catholic missionaries, particularly the Jesuits, Récollets, and Ursulines.
Don't even get me started on the Catholic school system.
Right? Ugh. Mm-hmm. In what we then called New France, which is present-day Quebec and parts of Ontario and the Maritimes.
Cool.
So that was New France. So that's where the French settlers went.
Right.
So 1611 was the first mission school. The first school for Indigenous children in New France was established by the Récollets, a Franciscan order,
very good.
But it saw little success. Good. I'm glad that first one didn't succeed. 1634, the Jesuit schools in Huronia. The Jesuits, also known as the Black Robes, don't like them already.
Already sound gross.
They founded mission schools among the Wendat, Huron. They sought to convert children to Catholicism while also introducing French customs. However, these schools struggled because the Wendat saw little reason to adopt French ways.
Of
exactly.
Course they
Why
did.
would they need to
Leave
adopt
them
French
be.
ways? What they were doing was just fine.
Yeah. And probably were learning and they were like, this is fucked.
Yeah, for real.
I don't want to go over to this.
Yeah, they were like, no, we're good.
Yeah, we're good.
They're like speaking them in French, like, come over here. They're like, no, we're fine.
No,
They're like, you stay over there. Like, why are you even...
You're gonna come over here.
We didn't even invite you to this place.
Yeah. Yeah, we took it. We're taking it. You're coming over here.
Yeah.
And you're just like, I don't know.
Then in 1639, the Ursuline convent in Quebec happened. The Ursuline nuns, led by Marie de l'Incarnation,
very good,
who I believe we mentioned in a previous episode.
I feel like we did. You did.
Yeah, I remember. She's mentioned somewhere. We've talked about her before.
Yeah.
She established a school for... She was maybe in the first witchcraft episode. She was
very true.
So she established... So whatever happened to her, I'm glad she did, because she established a school for Indigenous girls.
Wow.
Unlike later residential schools, this convent allowed students to leave, but its goal was still assimilation through religious and domestic training.
Did it actually allow them, or is this just what we're reading?
Right, exactly.
Allow them as
maybe because it was run by a woman, her idea was to let them leave, and it just didn't work out that way.
True.
These early schools were largely unsuccessful because they failed to consider Indigenous perspectives on education and family. Many Indigenous parents withdrew their children when they saw the school as an attempt to erase their culture.
Very good.
Yeah. So by all accounts, the Indigenous people were just being really polite.
Yes.
The French were like, "Hey, we've built this school. We're going to educate your kids. We're going to teach your kids what our kids know." And the Indigenous people were like, "Well, we don't really need that." And they're like, "No, come on. Yeah, come on. We built you this nice schoolhouse. Come on over here. Come on, your kids, our kids. It'll all be good."
Yeah.
And then the Indigenous parents were like, "I mean."
Well,
I guess if you're going to keep coming over here and asking me, and then they were like, oh no, this is no bueno, no good. They're coming back home with me, and I shouldn't have said bueno there. That was really, I think, disrespectful.
It's okay, we didn't mean to.
But
we're still learning. We're learning.
Yeah, we're learning, and that's just like the slang. I'm digging myself a hole here.
You're not digging
anyway.
So
yeah, and then the French were like, bring your kids to our school. And the Indigenous parents were like, no, actually, it's okay. We're okay. And the French were like, please. And the Indigenous people were like, okay, fine. Just for a little bit. And then eventually they were like, okay, you're just... And then they kept teaching them stuff like, your culture is bad. Then they were like... They were like,
and
this.
Don't speak in your language or we're going to whip the shit out of you.
And the parents were like, listen, we said we'd send our kids to you. You got to stop hitting them.
Yeah.
You got to stop.
They're like, if you keep
okay,
talking
fine,
back to
fine.
us
We won't
like
hit them. We won't hit them. Please let them come back.
We'll just murk them.
Send them. Yeah, we'll just mark them. Fuck. Okay.
Yeah.
So the another key period is the expansion and Protestant involvement, which was in the 1700s.
Like that's technically what I am, which I don't.
No, you're not. You're not technically anything.
Yeah, that's what I was told I was growing up was Protestant, and I'm like, Ugh, bleach me now.
Bleach me.
Bleach me from all.
Did you just make up that phrase?
Yeah, should we put that on a t-shirt?
We should put that on a t-shirt.
Along with
bleach me.
Bleach me now.
That's her first podcast catchshphrase. We
I
just
love
come
it.
Out. Bleach me.
Bleach
That's
me.
what we're going to say when people suck.
Yes.
Ugh, bleach me.
And they're going to be like, what? And we're like, shut up.
Shut up. Yeah. You don't
Ride
know.
for Richard. Okay?
Listen. Yeah. Ride for Richard or bleach me.
Bleach me. Yeah. That's all.
So after the British took control of New France in 1763, Protestant missionaries, particularly Anglicans, Methodists, and Presbyterians, side note, I was baptized Anglican.
Were you?
Yep. They joined the push to educate and civilize, in air quotes, Indigenous children. And I fucking hate that. The Church of England and Methodist missions in Upper Canada, now Ontario, Protestant churches built schools with the aim of replacing Indigenous spirituality and languages with English and Christianity. And languages with,
This whole also, this is like a side note, and I'm not trying to like step on any, well, maybe I am, but this whole like, I'm listening to this, it's kind of reminding me of like what's going on with ICE.
Yeah, it's exactly,
you know,
this is
kind of
very,
creepishly a little too familiar.
Which is why it's very topical and important we're talking about this and doing these episodes.
Yep, everyone listen closely and see
if you
see what I'm seeing, like talking about here.
Yeah, make sure your kids know you were on the right side of history.
Yeah.
Now this one's going to be a little close to home because the Mohawk Institute, which opened in 1831, was one of the first permanent Indigenous boarding schools. It was run by the Anglican Church in, drumroll please, Brantford, Ontario. Though not yet a formal residential school, it set the pattern of removing children from their families to Christianize and, in air quotes, civilize them.
Sounds a little too familiar.
Yeah. At this stage, the schools still relied on missionary funding rather than government support. Many Indigenous parents resisted sending their children, often removing them from schools when they saw the harm being done.
Wow. Okay, so education methods and daily life in early missionary schools. Though early missionary schools varied, they generally followed the same oppressive structure. Number 1, language suppression. Indigenous children were forced to learn French, Catholic schools, or English in Protestant schools.
Yeah.
Indigenous languages were discouraged or outright banned, marking the beginning of language loss that would escalate in later residential schools. And I know that, like, abuse, like physical abuse, would take place in order to like
absolutely
train.
We're gonna have a whole episode on it.
Oh, gosh.
Also, and just to put into perspective how close residential schools are, a local activist, local to here, his name is Carl. He's actually him and Sean Vanderklis, Carl Dockstader and Sean Vanderklis. They had a podcast, One Dish.
Oh, you've said this before. No,
yes, I have. Yeah, One Dish, One Mic.
Oh, yeah, because the dish with one spoon.
Dish with one spoon. Thank you. Yeah. So Carl, I saw at some sort of event one time, and he was speaking, and his grandmother was in a residential school.
Really?
Yes. And they're Oneida, and his grandma, he had spoken about how
first-hand accounts.
Yeah, how she, secretly practiced her language so that way she could remember.
Good for her. I mean, that's
right?
crazy. You shouldn't have to do that. That's just insane.
Yeah.
Okay, so religious indoctrination, baptism, and conversion to Christianity were a major focus. Of course they were. Children were taught European-style prayers, hymns, and religious texts. Indigenous spirituality and ceremonies were condemned as pagan or savage. Why?
This is why we don't say savage.
Yes.
This is why we don't go savage. It's a slur.
It's a slur. That is so fucked. I'm actually not looking forward, but I'm so intrigued now for future episodes to explain why the fuck that outlook was even created, because like I said,
it's all about control. Control the masses.
Yeah, exactly.
Control the masses.
Yeah.
It's all about colonizing.
Yeah. So, okay, number 3, gendered education. Boys were trained for agricultural, manual labor, and conversion. Funny, that's all 3 things that I do, and I'm a fucking girl. And
Hell yeah.
Do it better than half the boys I know. Okay, so agriculture.
I'm in agriculture too, and manual labor.
Yeah. European-styled political and religious roles. Girls were taught domestic skills like sewing, cooking, and childcare, reinforcing European gender roles. Actually, Jake cooks most of our fucking meals.
Yeah, Kyle cooks all of our meals. What up?
Yeah, what up is right. Okay, so number 4, harsh discipline. Okay, here we go. Corporal punishment, beatings, confinement was common for those who resisted religious teachings or spoke their indigenous language.
Horrible.
That doesn't sound very godly.
Yeah, that doesn't
Not to
sound
me.
very Christian.
No, European-style school discipline replaced traditional indigenous approaches to teaching and community accountability. Sounds a little fucking...
Let's take a moment during this break to talk about something that matters, something that doesn't get to be background noise. The Anishinaabe-Moan word, Nikinagana, means we are all related, and we are. But relationship isn't just about words, it's about responsibility. Canadian author Naomi Klein once said, "It is not enough to say that we live on Indigenous land. We have to act as if we do." And one way to do that is by supporting Pay Your Rent, a grassroots mutual aid initiative that offers direct material support to Indigenous organizers across this land. It's not charity, it's rent. For those of us who aren't Indigenous to this place, it's a way to show up differently, to redistribute some of what's been taken. The Pay Your Rent Fund started as a one-time request for help in 2018 and grew into a nonprofit called Nikinagana. Your monthly or one-time donation can help provide food, hygiene supplies, housing support, and resources for Indigenous-led resistance and community care. So if you've ever said, "We're all related," ask yourself, are you being a good relative? Visit payyourrent.ca and find out more about how you can be part of something better. Now, back to this case.
Yeah, probably shouldn't say the word on here. Anyways.
Here are some, I don't even know what to say, so we're just going to keep going. Resistance and Indigenous perspectives. Despite missionary efforts, many Indigenous communities resisted. Good. That's what we're doing.
We need resistance.
Yeah, that's right. Resistant. And resist now. Revolt. Revolution.
Revolution.
So parents withdrew their children. If they saw a negative impact of schooling, many simply took their children home, as early schools did not yet have the force of law.
Okay.
They also had selective adoption. So some communities allowed their children to attend missionary schools to learn European languages or skills that could help trade and diplomacy, but they did not accept full assimilation.
They just lied to them.
Yeah,
they promised.
Lied.
They fully lied. So
they lied.
All for all for selfish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways,
You couldn't have just lived and worked together and just, you know.
No. Like you said, control.
Yeah. And, I'm sorry. I read this wrong. I was saying, wait, just wait a minute. Oh, yeah. So many Indigenous communities resisted. Yeah, I did read it right.
Yeah, you read it right, yeah.
So and then there was also spiritual adaptation. So some Indigenous people integrated Christian teachings into their existing beliefs rather than abandoning their traditions completely. Do you want to do the last one?
You do it. You're on a roll, and then I'll go into the next one.
Okay. So the shift toward government control in the late 1800s. By the mid-19th century, missionary schools had not succeeded in fully assimilating Indigenous children. Good.
Yeah, good.
The Canadian government began to take notice and sought more aggressive measures to solve the Indian problem, which is a term used in colonial policy, and I hate that.
I do too.
I hate it more than anything.
It sounds wrong. Like
sounds
even when you
wrong,
say
yeah. In 1842 was the Bagot Report. It was a report by the colonial government concluded that day schools were not effective and recommended removing Indigenous children from their families entirely.
Wow.
So this report is what got the children removed from their families.
Sounds a lot like kids in cages.
Yes.
That we know
sounds a lot like us. 1857, the Gradual Civilization Act. This law aimed to forcibly assimilate Indigenous peoples by stripping their legal status if they adopted European customs. It's just fucked up.
Also, no one's forcing you to listen to this fucking podcast. So if you have a problem with any of the outlooks we have,
fuck off.
Fuck off.
Yeah.
And you're doing great, sweetie.
Yeah. Great job, Kim. We don't like the Kardashians.
No.
I will buy Skims if it's thrifted.
Yes. Because you're supporting a small business.
A small business. In the 1870s, this is when formal residential schools began.
Okay.
The Canadian government partnered with churches. This is when it got bad because the government partnered with churches. That's why my favorite phrase is separation of church and state.
Yep.
Separation of church and state.
We should have that on a t-shirt too.
We should.
Yeah.
Ugh, bleach me.
Yeah, bleach me. Bleach me now.
So the Canadian government partnered with churches to create the official residential school system where attendance would soon become mandatory. The early missionary schools of the 1600s to the 1800s set the foundation for the residential school system that followed. While they were not yet as large or systematized as later government-run institutions, they introduced the key elements of cultural erasure, language suppression, religious indoctrination, and forced separation from families. These schools proved that the colonial authorities saw Indigenous education as a means of empowerment, but as a tool for assimilation. Did I read colonial and not colonial up here?
Yeah, that's okay though.
That's okay. The Bagot Report. A report by the colonial government, not the Colonel government. Sorry.
Colonel Sanders.
I always think Colonel Mustard.
Oh yeah, Colonel Mustard, yeah.
In the next phase of this series, we'll explore how the government took over from the missionaries, leading to the establishment of the residential school system as a nationwide policy.
Oh gosh.
So this is the rise of the government and church-run residential schools in the 1870s. There's not that much. By the late 19th century, the colonial project, not colonel, in Canada had shifted from religious missionary efforts to a more coordinated and systemic approach to assimilating Indigenous peoples. While the early missionary schools from the 1600s to the 1800s laid the groundwork for cultural erasure, it was during the 1870s that the Canadian government, in collaboration with Christian churches, formally established a nationwide residential school system. Awful. This era saw the development of mandatory attendance laws, government-funded institutions, and the systemic removal of Indigenous children from their families, creating one of the darkest chapters in Canadian history. Ali, why don't you do number one?
Okay, the political and ideological foundations. The, in quotations, Indian problem. That's so fucking rude.
I hate it.
And government justification. As Canada moved toward Confederation, 1867, Indigenous nations were seen as an obstacle to nation building. That's fucked.
It's fucked.
Settler expansion, railway construction, and economic development depended on land that Indigenous communities occupied. This is so yeah. The government aimed to eliminate Indigenous governance structures, languages, and cultures in favor of European-style citizenship and just fucking taking over, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's what they did.
The prevailing ideology at the time was that Indigenous people were savages who needed to be civilized, Christianized, and integrated into Euro-Canadian society. One of the key architects of this policy was Sir John A. Macdonald, Canada's first prime minister.
And we're going to do an episode on him because he's a Canadian
he deserves
creepy.
one. He deserves to.
He's
Yeah, he's a
Canadian
good,
creepy.
good creep. Yep. Who actively supported the use of residential schools as a tool for forced assimilation. So the role of churches, although the government took a leading role in policy and funding, churches continued to run the schools, particularly the Catholic Church, do you want me? Oblates, Jesuits, Grey Nuns, etc. The Anglican Church, the Presbyterian Church, the Methodist Church, they all sound ugh.
Yeah.
Which later the Methodist Church, which later became part of the United Church of Canada. These churches saw residential schools as an opportunity to convert Indigenous children to Christianity and eradicate Indigenous spiritual practices. Those beautiful, beautiful practices.
Beautiful.
Religious instruction was a key component of the curriculum, and Indigenous ceremonies, languages, and beliefs were condemned as evil and primitive. Funny, it literally sounds like what you're teaching. Okay,
Yeah.
Anyways, you carry on.
So here are the key policies and laws that created the residential school system. And we did talk a little bit about this. So the Gradual Civilization Act in 1857, this law sought to assimilate Indigenous people by encouraging individual land ownership and European customs. It failed largely because Indigenous communities resisted abandoning their cultural
Good for them.
traditions. They did their best.
Even
they were against the man.
It was like a mouse against a cat. Like,
they were against the man.
Yeah.
The Bagot Report from 1842 to 1844. So that's how long the study took.
Okay.
This government study recommended the separation of Indigenous children from their families as the best way to assimilate them, arguing that missionary schools were ineffective unless children were fully removed from Indigenous influences.
So cruel.
It's just beyond
because
abhorrent,
if someone
aberrant.
had ripped their children from their arms, they would have a lot to say about it.
Yeah.
But, the other way around is somehow justified in the name of God.
Yeah.
It's just so,
fucked up.
it's so
Instead of like the
crazy.
name of like the land and of the living people who you
they're
can physically see and
however
touch
they want to
and
justify
sustain
it, you're
it's fucked up.
fucking cowards, whatever.
There was also the Indian Act in 1876. It was the most significant piece of legislation in Canadian colonial history, and it shaped Indigenous life for over a century. Among its many oppressive measures, it made Indigenous peoples wards of the state rather than autonomous nations.
Wow.
Criminalized Indigenous government systems, spiritual practices, and ceremonies like the potlatch and the Sundance were banned, and it gave the government the power to forcibly remove Indigenous children from their families and then place them in residential schools.
Wow.
Horrible.
Yeah.
In 1879, the Davin Report and the U.S. model came next. So Nicholas Flood Davin, a Canadian journalist and politician, was sent to the United States to study their Indigenous boarding school system. His report recommended aggressive assimilation and the adoption of a similar model in Canada. One of the schools Davin studied was the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania, founded by Colonel Richard Henry Pratt, whose motto was "Kill the Indian, save the man." Davin's report laid the foundation for Canada's residential school system, which combined government control with church administration. It's fucking brutal.
That's so fucked.
Like, this is heavy.
This is really heavy.
It's
almost too much
awful.
to handle.
It fucking is. Like,
I feel like a weight on me for this.
it's our ancestors. That's why we're here.
And I was just, twiddling my thumbs, riding my scooter, not a care in the world, taking everything for granted.
And our peers who are Indigenous were trying to do the same things as us with the weight of all the generational trauma upon them.
Yes.
Like, imagine trying to do the things that we're doing in life now with the weight of it's...
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to do number 3?
The expansion of residential schools from the 1880s to 1900s. The first government-funded residential school was established in 1883 in Battleford, Saskatchewan. Operated by the Catholic Church, of course it was.
Of course.
Over the next few decades, the system expanded with schools opening across Canada, including Kamloops Indian Residential School, in 1890 in British Columbia.
Good luck with that.
Shubenacadie.
Yeah.
Shubenacadie. Indian Residential School in 1929, Nova Scotia. Mohawk Institute, already operating since 1831, but expanded in this period in Ontario. By 1900s. Oh, yeah. By the 1900s, there were over 60 residential schools across Canada, forcibly removing thousands of Indigenous, innocent sweet babies.
Like literal babies.
Wow.
So sad. So here is life in the early residential schools. They were designed not to educate, but to erase Indigenous identity.
It's so sad. So it's like a genocide.
Literally.
Yeah,
The condition,
which we now know.
Yeah. The conditions were harsh, the discipline was brutal, and many children never saw their families again. As we know, there was a forcible removal from families, so Indian agents, priests, and police would take children from their homes, often with no warning, and parents had little say in the matter.
It's almost like
that's somebody coming into your home and just taking your child.
I mean, there is a whole thing on like when Dr. Phil sent all the kids to the ranch.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing. It was, and there was abuse and sexual abuse that happened there.
Yeah, those adolescent camps in the States. Those are no good.
No, yeah.
Many children were taken hundreds of kilometers away to prevent escape and to maintain full control.
Yeah, and so that like if they tried to escape, where are you running to?
Yeah, where are they going to go?
It's almost what they do with the homeless now.
Yes,
they
yeah.
remove them from a city or a town that they don't want them in, and they drive them so far that they can't walk back.
Exactly, yeah. And then they have to like create new community and find new resources.
Or hopefully, in their eyes, overdose and die.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I can't believe I'm saying these
Right.
things. It's crazy.
So in life in the early residential schools, there was also strict European-style education. So Indigenous children were forced to cut their hair.
Oh, that's so sacred.
I know, it's so sacred. They were forced to also wear European-style uniforms and take Christian names. So speaking their native language was strictly forbidden, with punishments ranging from isolation to physical violence. And the curriculum focused on religious instruction, manual labor, and basic literacy, not higher education.
Okay, I have to say this, like, say these systems run by Christians or Catholic or whatever, you reform them, like they now are like brainwashed and thinking and acting the way you want. You're telling me that even if that happened, which is what you're trying to gain, you're going to look at them as equal as... No. So it's like you...
No, they were doing that just to...
It's a cover. It's just a fucking cover.
No, they were doing that just, as a cover, and to just... They only wanted to assimilate them enough into our culture to be forced slaves.
Forced slaves. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Not that slavery's never not forced.
I need to eradicate that from my vocabulary. Saying anything like, oh my gosh, I hate it. I catch myself all the time after saying it. I wish I didn't say. I need to. Just bleach me.
Just bleach me.
Oh my bleach. Oh my bleach.
There was also physical, emotional, and sexual abuse in the early residential schools.
Don't doubt it.
There was beatings, solitary confinement, and humiliation were common forms of discipline. Many children were severely malnourished due to poor food quality and experimental nutrition programs, and sexual abuse was widespread, with many cases documented in the later years. There was also really high mortality rates. So
no doubt.
There were disease,
murder, moida.
Yeah, there were.
And disease.
On top of that, there were disease outbreaks. Tuberculosis, smallpox, influenza were common due to overcrowding and poor sanitation.
Yeah, which I wonder if in their original communities had outbreaks like this. Like
probably not. No, the disease the Europeans introduced disease. Yeah.
So another thing that we
introduced smallpox for sure.
Yes, 100%.
Many children died, and their families were rarely notified. And the unmarked graves crisis of recent years has revealed mass burial sites at multiple former school locations.
A hole in the ground, a big massive hole tossed in like garbage.
Yeah, so sad.
Yeah.
Do you want to do the Indigenous resistance?
Sure.
Okay.
Indigenous resistance and early pushback. This is what we like, right?
Yeah.
Despite government control, Indigenous communities never stopped resisting.
Good.
Parents hid their children or taught them their traditions in secret to preserve their language and culture. Sounds like the Holocaust.
Literally.
Sounds like...
Yeah.
Indigenous leaders like Chief Mistawasis and Chief... Arakakup protested against forced assimilation but were ignored. Some children ran away, though many were caught and returned or perished in the attempt. You have to fight back.
You have to fight
back. You have
to
if you can.
Yeah.
It's like... Anyways, I'm not going to say it. Even in the 1800s, some non-Indigenous people criticized the schools, but their voices were largely ignored by the government. You know what? I'm going to say it. Also seems like when people are... calling out women for it's like crying wolf, but like calling rape, crying rape, and being ignored. Sounds a little
And here is the legacy of early residential schools. By the 20th century, the Canadian government had perfected the residential school system as a nationwide tool of cultural genocide. The number of schools increased, attendance became legally mandatory, and enforcement grew harsher. The government and churches worked together to maintain this system for over a century. That's over 100 years.
That's insane.
It would take decades before Indigenous activism, survivor testimonies, and public awareness forced Canada to acknowledge the devastation these schools caused. The rise of government and church-run residential schools in the 1870s was a pivotal moment in Canadian history and colonial oppression. What started as missionary-led efforts turned into a state-enforced system of forced assimilation, cultural destruction, and abuse. In later episodes, we will explore the peak years of residential schools, the resistance movements, and the long fight for justice and reconciliation.
How much blood is on their hands?
So much.
So much that we can't even fathom. Like, we can't fathom.
So much.
Yeah.
So the next thing, it's a little things we've talked about. There's not much to this. It's just the policies that created the system. Mm-hmm. The residential school system in Canada, as we know, was not an accidental development. It was the result of deliberate policies enacted by the government and enforced in partnership with Christian churches. These policies aimed to assimilate Indigenous peoples by systematically dismantling their languages, cultures, and traditional way of life. Mm-hmm. The legal and political foundation for residential schools was built over several decades, beginning in the mid-19th century and solidifying in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Mm-hmm. Here is a detailed look at the key policies that created, expanded, and enforced the system. So we talked about the Gradual Civilization Act.
Yeah.
And that was of 1857. And the key features of that act were it required Indigenous men that were 21 and over to renounce their Indigenous status and adopt a European identity in order to become full British subjects.
Right.
It promised private land ownership and access to some legal rights, but only if individuals abandoned their Indigenous identity. And few Indigenous people chose to participate, as it required them to reject their culture, language, and traditions. While this act was largely unsuccessful, it set the stage for later policies that would enforce assimilation by coercion rather than voluntary participation. Mm-hmm. So the Baggett Report we talked about, and its push for the boarding schools, its key recommendations. Just because I don't think I have to go through what the Baggett Report is again.
No.
Its key recommendations was day schools run by missionaries were not effective at assimilating Indigenous children because they still lived with their families and retained their culture. Mm-hmm. Boarding schools should be established where children would be completely separated from their families to remove Indigenous influence. And education should focus on manual labor for boys and domestic skill for girls, reinforcing the idea that Indigenous people were only fit for low-level labor in colonial society. Wow. This report provided the foundation for the residential school model that would emerge decades later.
It's insane.
Right? Then there was the Indian Act of 1876. It was the legal foundation for residential schools. As we know, it classified Indigenous people as wards of the state. The key features of this act was it gave the federal government full control over Indigenous identity, governments, and education. It allowed the government to impose laws and policies without Indigenous consent and mandated the creation of residential schools, forcing Indigenous children to be removed from their families. It criminalized Indigenous culture and spiritual practices such as the potlatch and Sundance. And later amendments in the 1884 and 1895 explicitly banned these ceremonies. Mm-hmm. This law made it legal for the government to force Indigenous children into residential schools, even against the will of their parents.
Yeah. Control.
Then we talked about the Davin Report. Let's not forget, kill the Indian, save the man. Mm-hmm. It recommended that Canada adopt a similar model to the U.S., emphasizing the forcible removal of children from their families, complete cultural and linguistic erasure, religious conversion, and European-style education, the use of manual labor as a key part of the curriculum to train Indigenous boys as farmhands and girls as domestic workers. This report directly led to the expansion of government-funded residential schools across Canada.
Wow.
Woo!
Cray.
Then there was the mandatory attendance laws in 1894 and 1920, and these were amendments to the Indian Act. Initially, many Indigenous parents resisted sending their children to residential schools. In response, the government amended the Indian Act to make attendance mandatory. In the 1894 amendment, it allowed government officials, police, and missionaries to forcibly take Indigenous children from their homes and made it illegal for Indigenous parents to refuse to send their children to school. Mm. The 1920 amendment declared that that every Indigenous children between the ages of 7 and 15 years old must attend residential school. It gave the Department of Indian Affairs complete control over Indigenous education and expanded the network of residential schools, making attendance nearly universal. By the 1920s, the majority of Indigenous children in Canada were in residential schools. Do you want me to keep going?
Well, what else do we do? The church and state.
Yeah.
which was Catholic, Anglican, Presbyterian, Methodist.
Yeah.
Yeah, all gross. Okay, I'm not going to say that that's rude. But,
But
in this sense, they were.
Yeah, they were. And the government and the churches worked together with...
Yeah, it was bully. They bullied them.
They bullied them, yeah. And the government provided funding and legal authority while the churches ran the schools and imposed strict religious education.
Yeah, they ganged up is what they did.
That's exactly what they did.
Okay.
And then there was the Gradual Enfranchisement Act of 1885 and the further erosion of Indigenous rights.
Genocide, yeah.
Building on earlier policies, this act stripped Indigenous peoples of their governance structures, replacing traditional leadership with government-approved band councils, required Indigenous men to give up their status to vote or own land privately, and gave government officials more power over Indigenous communities, including the ability to relocate entire groups.
Sounds like Black history.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, all of these, and who dominated that history.
Yeah, fuck. It's heavy.
It's heavy. It's like...
we just need to be better.
We need to, yeah. I mean, there's no time like the present.
Right?
Although some countries seems like our next
going backwards. Yeah, they're going backwards. The Gradual Enfranchisement Act reinforced the assimilation of goals of the residential school system, ensuring that Indigenous governance structures and traditions would be weakened. From the 1830s to the 1940s, there was expansion and experimentation. As the residential school system expanded, new policies allowed for disturbing experiments on Indigenous children. There were nutritional experiments in the 1940s and 50s. The government conducted experiments on Indigenous children in residential schools, deliberately withholding essential nutrients to study malnutrition.
That's an experiment. Hitler did that.
Yes, he did.
My God. My bleach.
Yeah, bleach. Medical and psychological testing. Some children were subjected to experimental treatments without consent. Fuck you, old Canada. Fuck you. These policies highlighted the dehumanization of Indigenous children.
You think?
Who were seen as subjects for assimilation and experimentation rather than as human beings.
Oh my God.
These policies created the residential school system. The policies that created the residential school system were deliberate, calculated, and upheld for over a century. They were designed to erase Indigenous cultures, separate children from their families, and force assimilation through coercion, violence, and neglect. Although the government and churches knew about the abuses taking place, that's right, they knew about it. They continued to enforce these policies
and protect
until the last residential school closed in 1996.
Wow, we were already...
I was 6.
Little dweebs, yeah.
Future episodes will explore the long-term impact of these policies, the survival and resistance of Indigenous communities, and the fight for justice, recognition, and reconciliation.
That fight for justice is what I'm here for.
That's right. And then you can pop over to the conclusion. Mm-hmm. Yep. This wraps up the first episode in our summer series on residential schools. Today we explored the early foundations, how Indigenous education existed long before colonization, how missionary schools disrupted traditional ways of life, and how the government and churches built a system designed to erase Indigenous identity.
And these aren't just stories from the past. They have real ongoing impacts today, as you can hear as my tone just...
Yeah.
We know the history is difficult to hear, and if today's episode brought up any difficult emotions for you, please know that support is available. Indigenous listeners can reach out to the Hope for Wellness helpline at 1-855-242-3310 or visit www.hopeforwellness.ca for online chat support. Utilize it if you need it. Mm-hmm. If you or a loved one is a residential school survivor, the National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available 24/7 at 1-866-925-4419.
These are hard but necessary conversations, and we appreciate you being here with us. If you'd like to continue the discussion, you can follow us on Instagram at Canadian Creepies, rate and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts, or reach out, text us, DM us, or send us an email at CanadianCreepiesPodcast@gmail.com.
Yep, and in our next episode, we'll be taking you inside the walls of the schools. We'll talk about the strict routines, the punishments, and the horrifying conditions these poor, innocent, beautiful
Sweet
children
babies.
endured, including abuse, neglect, starvation, and even medical experimentation. We'll also examine the role of the Catholic, Anglican, United, and Presbyterian churches in running these institutions.
It's a tough but essential chapter in understanding the full scope of what happened. We hope you'll join us. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other.
Bye-bye. Thank you to Kyle McDonald for editing and composing our theme song.